So welcome to the Compassionate Capitalist podcast and radio show, the Compassionate Capitalist show. As you know from listening in the past, for those who are listening or watching now on YouTube, this is, our whole thing here is about giving entrepreneurs and investors the information they need so that they can successfully chart a plan, a strategy to build successful businesses that can sustain and grow and scale and become profitable. And the investors that are investing in those have the knowledge they need to be able to make wise investments, but also to help those companies navigate it as they need to in order to achieve the results that they want to create the wealth that comes out of compassionate capitalists, being a compassionate capitalist and investing that way. And so one of the things that's been a hot topic right now, it's in the press probably every day, okay? And that is our current job market and what is going on with the economy as we start to pull ourselves out of the pandemic and the economic downturn that our economy went through, all the people that stayed home, all the people that were laid off, all the people that were deferred, all that. And then now as companies come back into it and they're ramping back up, there appears to be a labor shortage out there. And although the jobs, I just saw the job report that says that they were expecting 1 million jobs, there's only 200 and something thousand new jobs. So we're still not, offering enough jobs, I guess, to get back to where we were in the economy before. But even bigger is this help wanted signs and things that are happening. And there's a lot of dynamics of a natural sort of free market change to upscale the salaries. There's a lot of impact with who's in the marketplace, who's not in the marketplace for jobs, who's available for those kind of jobs, what kind of jobs are available. And so it just so happens I have a leading industry expert on the show with me today, Christine Wong Rambo. Wave and say hello, and I'll introduce her to be a part of this conversation, because I don't think there's anybody out there that can really tell us what the real scoop is. When she and I started, we met on another online webinar. We got together through LinkedIn. We had a conversation, and I just had all these little bells and whistles going off that said, oh my God, because anybody has been on this, listened to the show for a while knows I get little goosies when it comes to economic stuff. And so Christine was like singing my song. Okay. And so let me tell you about Christine. So Christine is a certified international, actually, let me say this all correctly, right? So she is a certified international economic development council, that's IEDC, and certified economic developer. That's what makes her extremely qualified. But even more so than that, she's an award-winning, experienced, effective economic development, marketing, communications, and branding professional with nearly 30 years of experience. Christine has a proven record of positioning organizations and communities for growth using effective marketing strategies, strategic management tactics, comprehensive branding, and digital social media strategies. She's recruited economic development projects to communities and helped communities to grow and expand through her economic expertise and insights into things that they can do. Little known kind of fact is that she, prior to entering in economic development, Christine worked for 12 years as an award-winning anchor for KTBS. It's an ABC affiliate in Shreveport, Louisiana, where she still lives down in Louisiana, and KNOE, a CBS affiliate in Monroe, Louisiana. And she earned 3 Louisiana Associated Press's awards for her feature reporting, investigative journalism, and National Radio Television Digital News Association Award. And she has her own company. Her company that she started is Upsize MS, Upsize Marketing Strategies. The website is upsizems.com, that you're going to definitely want to go to. And if you check out the show notes we're going to show some, we're going to have some visual aids today too. And you're going to get to see those in probably on the blog page, but, or if you're on Blog Talk Radio, you can see it in the visual art display that they show. But you're going to want to go to her website to get more information when we're all done with this. So officially, welcome, Christine. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Compassionate Capitalist Show.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that plug that I'm going to get the big head after this.
Yeah.
So, and it's been
yeah.
a pleasure talking with you about economic development. It's one of my passions.
Yeah.
And definitely, you asked me earlier, how did I go from broadcast journalism into economic development? Well, like so many of my colleagues, you kind of fall into it, because it's not one of those highlighted careers like doctors, lawyers, firemen, police officers that, you have a career fair and walk into and say, hey, I want to do that. But what happened with me is, like so many other economic developers with a communications background, you're using those presentation skills to sell your community, your region, to try to recruit businesses to come and locate there. And as a certified economic developer, you're not an economist. I kind of liken us to more like we're the engineers of the economy, whereas economists, they deal in theory and economic models. We're the boots on the ground. We're working with companies to try to get them to grow and help them to grow. We're working with our legislators to try to knock down some of those barriers that inhibit economic growth. We're working with companies to help them recruit workforce. We work with workforce partners to help try to upskill our labor force, because in the new economy, it's the real resource is the human capital. And I know that is a passion of yours to talk about, our human capital. And we have gone through so many stages of our economy, starting with the first industrial revolution back in the late 1700s, when we moved away from handcrafted items to using steam power to start using simple machines to begin mass producing. Then moving into the second industrial revolution, where we've electrified our factories and have an assembly line and really get into mass producing goods. Then in the late 2000s, in the late 20th century, we began what was called the third industrial revolution, really with the mass use of computers and the growth of the internet and automation. But what is interesting now is every prior industrial revolution has lasted centuries, right? A century or more. But now we're on the precipice of what's called the fourth industrial revolution, which in just a short span of 2 decades, we're now standing at a fundamental change of our economy. What the fourth industrial revolution means is that the barriers between the technological, biological, and physical world are dissolving, they're merging together. Hence, we have gotten artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, so much more mass automation than we've ever had before. And it's really mind-boggling, the speed of that change. And I think that's why so many people are very scared and nervous as we move into this fourth industrial revolution. Because if you don't have a certain skill sets, that including digital skills, you may become obsolete in the new workforce. And that's a really scary proposition, Karen.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that is definitely one of those contributing factors to the skill. It's a job gap, but it's really due to a skill gap,
Right.
because as the needs of companies, and we'll get into this because we talked a little bit in our call when we were chatting before, is about manufacturing has changed so much. one, you don't need as many people because there is so much automation, but the people that work there aren't just people that are moving something from here to there kind of a thing and being, because they have robots to do that now. There are people that are augmenting what the robots do to make sure the robots do it right, and complete the
That's
task. And
right.
so,
That's right.
right. And that's a different skill
Right.
set. And I'm
Right.
not sure our schools are really doing, and the people that are displaced out of that, where do they go get those skills, right? So let's talk about those, get into some of that stuff, right? So
Right.
let's go through this, because I want to start with the discovery that you shared with me in our population growth that just came out of the census. And there may be a slight, variation of error, because they struggled with getting the so many people out there to actually knock on the doors versus the ones that, I don't know, maybe you've got those stats on what was the participation. We don't really know because it's only every 10 years. And in 10 years ago, they didn't do, a 800 number call in or go online and click this form and put in this stuff. They didn't have the automation that they did this time. And it was very dependent on people knocking on doors. But this time we didn't have the people knocking on doors because of the
Right.
pandemic.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
talk about, like, you got a chart up for those that are watching on YouTube. Christine has put up a chart that is really stunning when you look at the decline in the U.S. I'm just describe this for the listeners, a decline in the U.S. population for decades going from 1790 to 2020, and then the participation in the workforce of adult able-bodied people to be able to participate in the workforce. So describe, describe what we're looking at here, and the
Yes.
impact and the significance of it.
Yes. So, Karen, you're absolutely right. There are some states that are disputing the outcome of the 2020 census because of the effects of the pandemic. However, what's undisputable is the continual gradual decline over decades. So, even if you were to dispute this 7.4% population growth, it's historic. This is a historic trend. This has been happening since World War II, since the baby boomers, and we've seen a gradual decline in population growth. So 7.4% is the population growth from the last census, which was 2010, to the most recent census, which was last year. But as you can see, that has been the evolution of our society over the years as families delay childbirth, as more women head into the workforce and delay having children. The number of children have fallen over the years, but it's also a signal to how our economies change from an agrarian based economy where you did need a lot of children to help work the farm, to one in which it's based on uh, high skills and knowledge and education. And that education is progressively more and more expensive to come by. The cost of raising children has skyrocketed because higher education costs have skyrocketed. So we're having less children because, frankly, we can't afford to have as large a family as we once did. The spending power of the dollar is not where it was. Our wages have not kept up with the rate of inflation. So all of that means a slower population increase. But what does that mean for our US economy, which is largely service based? And on the macro level, uh, we know that our gross domestic product is driven by population. And as our population starts to slowly decline over the decades, does that mean that our productivity slowly declines? Now, we've been able to stave off that decline in productivity because of our technology, because we've automated so many parts of our economy. But at some point, the rubber's going to meet the road, right? And I want to show this second part of my chart. And this is the workforce participation rate. This is the civilian labor force participation rate. And I pulled it from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this too, for those of you that can see this, the red line is the total US workforce participation rate, and it shows a slow decline. This large dip is right when the pandemic hit and we had to close down the economy. But what labor force participation rate means is that of the able-bodied people that can work 16 and over, what percentage is actually participating in the workforce, actually working in jobs or seeking jobs? Um, and we've seen that slowly decline because as baby boomers age, they're leaving the workforce, they're retiring early.
Oh, sure. So
Mhm.
that's our baby boomer bell that they've been talking for a long time about how this, this big bubble of
Yeah,
population is going to move through and eventually,
and
go
it's already
move out of
happening.
it. Yeah. So
Yeah,
then you have less, but it would seem that so that's a contributing factor because as people are
absolutely.
aging out, you now have you don't have you need somebody else to be a greeter at Walmart, and
Or
so,
someone else to run the factories. They
yeah.
bring with them or they leave taking with them a huge amount of institutional knowledge at the factories, at their
Mhm.
organizations, and but
Yeah.
that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah. Right. That's like,
Yeah, but but really, what is worrisome to so many employers out there is how do we replace that huge population of workers, the baby boomers? How do you attract the millennial workforce, which now makes up the largest segment of the workforce population, who, unlike their predecessors, the Generation X and the baby boomers, they come with them a completely different set of values and different meaning to the word work. They're not going to be tied to a 9 to 5 job, or actually in the former generations was maybe more like a 10-hour day. They're ready to quit when the bell rings, and they're ready to create a more work-life balance. But once again,
yes.
that's the subject of another podcast too.
Well, I do
So
have a question though about
mhm,
this chart since this is
yes,
based off of jobs, right? And over for those, it's covers a 20-year period from 2001 to 2021 and is just
yes.
a steady kind of decline. What would people working this shift for people not being W-2 but being 1099s or the gig economy, people having, multiple little businesses that they're running themselves so they don't have a job, would they be they
Yes.
would be counted in these numbers
Oh
or
yeah,
not counted in these
absolutely. They
numbers?
are counted in this participate workforce participation rate.
Because they're
You know,
filing taxes.
They're filing
So,
taxes. That's
okay.
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So they
Okay,
are
good.
being counted. So this trend, kind of lines up with our population trend too.
It does.
So, yeah. So what's worrisome is as our population is slowly declining, that also means the number of workers are slowly declining, but the workforce participation rate is slowly declining. So that's like a double whammy for our economy, right? So even of the smaller percentage of workforce, less people are interested in working. So what is worrisome to me as a woman is that the rate of workforce participation for women have started declining. In 2020, women have started participating in the workforce at record numbers, whereas we were holding 50% of the jobs. And then the pandemic hit, and that drove women out of the economy in a much greater disproportionate impact than men. And we're not coming back as quickly as the other demographics are coming back.
Yeah.
So these different lines show different groups. This orange line is Hispanic and Latino. This light blue line is Asian. Um, this red line is the overall population. This baby blue line way in the back is kind of overshadowed by this darker line that is whites. This line here is African American, but way down here are women. So the worrisome thing to me is if we cannot develop family friendly policies, does this permanently inhibit women from coming back into the workforce when we need them so desperately?
Yeah.
We're looking at, this pandemic has really revealed a lot of vulnerabilities in the way our economy has been structured and a society has been structured, Karen.
Yeah.
The
Well,
most go ahead.
I
Sorry.
was just, it's also interesting to note that where the other gray bar is, that's about when the Great Recession was hitting, right?
Yes,
It
that's
was like
correct.
leading, and so women were on the rise, gaining on the other ethnic groups or other classifications where they're kind of going down and the women were rising. And then after that, everybody dropped, but everybody else started to recover. And women didn't start recovering until really 2019.
Yeah.
And,
And
where
it's
it started
not as,
upticking and then it's all
yeah,
dropped down again in
right.
2020.
Right. And so
Interesting stuff.
women are not as recovering from the effects of the pandemic quite as fast as the other demographic groups. That disproportionate impact of the pandemic is due to there is no social support anymore for families. That goes back to the transition of our society from where everybody kind of stayed around grandma, grandpa, mom, and dad, and there was this family structure of support to watch the kids. Well, as society has become more and more mobile, we've moved away from that family support structure, and we're looking to childcare and nannies and other forms of family support. Well, during the pandemic, quality childcare centers were closing permanently because the reduced number of capacity restrictions just didn't support their business model.
Hmm.
And also, schools shut down. So we went to remote learning, but when you have young children, remote learning can't happen without a parent there turning on the internet and forcing them to attend their classes and learn their lessons. And that disproportionately fell to women. And and many, as the breakup of the nuclear family, many women head up households too. So, that in a nutshell kind of uh, is a microcosm of how our society and our
Hmm.
economy has really changed over the last century.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, and if when you look at the cost of health, of healthcare, as well as the cost of childcare. Childcare on average from people that I know that look for it, it's at least $1,000 a month. Sometimes it's $1,000 a week. And
right.
so you have
Depending
to
on the,
you're not making minimum wage and paying
yeah,
that. It's
right,
better to stay
right.
home because you can't afford the childcare because you make less than what the childcare costs. And
Exactly.
so, that's a really big issue if we're going to have full participation of women in the workforce. And it's one of those things too where they always talk about this discrepancy in wage. Well, one of the contributing factors is that women most often are the ones that are chosen within a household to stay at home with the kids when they're little, and that takes them out of the natural stair step progression of income in a corporate setting or just in the workforce as they gain more experience, because they've got this chunk of time, at least 5 to 6 years that they get into pre-K, that they haven't continued to progress at, whereas the males will have progressed, so they've got 5 years seniority on somebody that had originally maybe been hired at the same time. And so when you look at that, there's a frustration there as well. And unless you go back and get some additional skills, which I think leads into one of the contributing things. There's this debate on whether the continuation of the stimulus package is a factor, and I'm of the belief that it is a factor for the service industry that has notoriously been very low paid. They don't pay the recommended $15 an hour. We have a few of them now that are stepping up, that like a
Right,
Starbucks, and
right.
some of these ones that are, and I think it was Chipotle or something like that, we're going to, start paying $15 an hour as an entry level. Or sometimes they advertise that, but it's really sort of a lead into the door. But starting out, it might be 10, but you can get up to 15 in 6 months. And if you stick around, kind of a thing. And, so I think that some of the stuff that happened, because what I've heard from people is that they have elected to take that money because they went home, they just stayed, they went back and lived with the parents, so they didn't have rent because the that $1,200 extra a month is really kind of, that's before taxes, is really about what the cheapest rent you can get around any major metro in the US. I know where I live, that doesn't even get you a one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, and so but they use that to go and do online learning, to get get a certification in something, to go back and start, going to a tech school and get different skills. And maybe some of these skills, like you were talking, that you were referencing, that are part of the fourth wave, because why would I want to go and work for $2.50 an hour plus tips, as a critical worker, right? Not, that's, I can't live on that. I do that plus another job. Instead, I'm going to take this time and get something that's going to get me a 15, 20, $25 an hour wage. And then I don't have to be in the workplace doing those service jobs. And
Right.
I think that's definitely a fact. We'll find out right here in the next couple of months if that's really the case. But I think it's great that the free enterprise system, with the federal government announcing that they're going to have a $15 minimum wage, that's, and if the infrastructure bill gets passed, then we're going to have all of that work that's going to get done on our water infrastructure, our telecommunications, our bridges and roads and transportation and everything else is going to be at $15 an hour. Well, that's going to be a huge draw for a portion of the population that may not have had a lot of other skills to be able to step into jobs like that, get some on the job training, get some additional tech training, and start onto a new career path. And
Right.
I think that it's going to be a natural evolution that we may not in a lot of states like California, New York, and I think Colorado, Oregon, a bunch of them on the last election in 2020 passed referendums for $15 minimum wage. And now it's phased in. It takes 5 years to get there. But, there's a lot of states that are saying this is what it's going to be. So it'll be, interesting to see how that plays out with
Right.
participation in the workforce.
And I think many of these corporate leaders that are moving to a $15 minimum are doing it not necessarily out of the goodness of their hearts,
Yeah.
but really out of necessity. Because prior to
Hmm.
the pandemic, we were at what economists call zero unemployment. It was about 4% or lower. And that's practically, if you wanted a job, you could get a job. But I pointed to the workforce participation that wasn't as high as required for an economy that was booming. And what was interesting to note, even during the Great Recession, there were plenty of job openings, but job openings for people with the right skills. So that goes to what we've been talking about earlier about this skills gap. So it's just not enough to have a warm body in front of, a desk or an assembly line. You have to come with the right skill sets. And that skill set is not being met in so many communities. There's not enough industrial skills nor digital skills across the board. And it's interesting that, over the years, we have pushed people into 4-year higher education,
Right.
whether they were fit for it or not. But that was where parents were telling people, like their children, go get a 4-year degree because I don't want you working in this hot, dirty, sweaty factory like I am and your granddad before me. But the reality is that not everybody needs to go to get a 4-year degree, but
Right.
rather maybe a 2-year associate's degree in an industrial trade,
Right.
coming out making maybe more than someone starting off with a 4-year degree.
Right.
And we need those industrial skills. And the manufacturing environment is so different than what was going on during this second industrial revolution, where it was simple machines. And now, as you mentioned, Karen, everything is computerized. It's much more automated. You need so many more engineers. You need so many more people that have process technology degrees, and things that require maybe only a 2-year degree, or even in some cases a certificate program. So I think a real acknowledgement of this need to really upskill our entire workforce at every level is President Biden's proposal of the American Jobs Plan,
Yeah.
which would make a 2-year college, community college education free,
Right.
because we recognize that there are many manufacturers still left in America. America still are making products, but we're not making the workers for those manufacturing organizations and factories now. So we really need to go back and look at the way we're training our workers. And part of the American Jobs Bill is $100 million, I believe, for schools. But the thing is, are those schools producing the workers for the future? Is the way we're educating the future workforce the most appropriate way for the fourth industrial revolution?
Yeah.
Because there's a statistic that says that of those students that are currently in school right now, entering school, 65% of them will be working in jobs that aren't even created yet.
Right. I know
We don't,
the statistics always amaze me, and it's true. It always comes
yeah,
true.
yeah, we don't even know what type of jobs will be created in the next few years.
Hmm.
So how can our education system adapt to that when they're not even know what type of job they're training for?
Right.
So what they really have to do, instead moving away from that rote learning, 2 plus 2 is 4, and our multiplication tables, the way we learned it, we just memorized the multiplication
Yeah, but
tables.
new
We
math is, I don't know. Is that really like that's
It's a
it's
little scary. I know. I had to do that with my son going through Common Core. I had to relearn a new way of figuring out how 2 times 2
yeah.
equals 4 instead of just memorizing
Is
it.
it
But what it did was it forced real comprehension, and we really have to create creative thinkers and creative learners. That's one of the basic skills that this new economy is demanding, is
yeah.
creativity,
And critical thinking. Critical
critical
thinking.
thinking. Yes, creativity and critical thinking,
Yeah,
and digital
problem
skills.
solving. Problem
Yes,
solving.
problem solving,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
And you can't do that just by memorizing something.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you truly have to be creative. So how does that educator do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there needs to be real discussion about how we train the workforce of the future.
Well, and
And
also
just throwing money at the problem doesn't really solve it.
no, you have
Yeah,
to, there needs to be a, a match that says these are at least right now, because we have this shortage and this, where they're going and because even when it comes to like things that are necessary, like laying cable, right? They're going to put new cable in to create digital access
right.
throughout the country and everywhere, right? Well, I know where I am, which is just outside of a major metro in Atlanta, when they come, they don't have the workers to lay cables, because all those guys that actually knew how to lay cables, that had learned how to and on the job, they're retired. When we had a bunch of trees came down and they had to come out and fix it, a guy that came to my house had been retired for 3 years, and they called him up out of retirement to come and do the work, because, and he was traveling, he had stopped here and then he was going to Alabama, and then he was like, he was going all over the place as a retiree because they did not have the skills for that, right? HVAC,
Right. Right.
plumbing, electricians, all of that stuff. They just don't have
Truck
the,
drivers.
yes,
Yeah.
truck drivers, people that repair airplanes. One of
Yeah.
my friends, he said he never went to college. He just went straight from high school to becoming an airplane motor mechanic. And in 2 years, he came out of that making 50 grand or whatever it was, at that point in time. Right. And so, you can step into really good jobs with specific skills, and people just don't even know it. I was mentoring this kid that, he loves to wait tables. He likes serving people. And I said, but are you going to do that? Are you going to do that 10 years from now? Is that what you want to do? Maybe you can find a way to serve people in a different capacity. And I told him about this other lady that, after being out of the workforce for a number of years, raising the kids, got divorced and had to get herself back into the game. And she went and in like 18 months got her certificate to be able to do casts on arms and stuff, got a great job right away when she finished it. And she's helping people that are in pain and need help like this. And she's just got this low, you know what I mean? She's got the,
Right.
and I go, figure out something like that. There's a job for something that will serve, that will fill your emotional need, but also help you as you get older to be able
Right.
to know you can someday retire and stuff.
Right.
Right.
So with the fourth industrial revolution, things are changing so quickly that the top of the line technology of the day will probably be obsolete in a year or two, like our iPhones and all that. But what that means is that maybe by the time you're out of school with your 4-year degree, that degree is already obsolete. So what a lot of corporate leaders are doing is really leaning on certificate programs, because you can finish that in 6 months or a year. And IBM, we've traditionally thought of jobs as blue collar or white collar, right? IBM has launched a new model for training called
Oh,
new collar jobs, which,
really?
yes, which really is more high tech vocational school in a way, because the technical knowledge worker is in such high demand, and they are constantly having to reinvent the curriculum for them, because by the time they even finish the curriculum, it's obsolete. So the IBM invented or is spearheading this model called new collar jobs, which really is taking K through 12 students, not through even 2-year degrees or a 4-year college university setting, but through various certificate programs that are geared specifically to what IBM needs right then and there. So
Ah,
it's an interesting new model for workforce training, but we have to really take a look at all the different models for workforce training in this ever quickly evolving new economy.
yeah.
So
Do you know? Because I know for a while, and I would think it would still be there, but there was a tax credits for companies that retrained, brought employees in and
yes,
retrained them, gave them new
right,
skills,
that's
or
still
did this
there.
kind of stuff.
Yes,
Yeah. See,
yeah,
so
they're still there.
all kinds of companies could be using that tax credit to identify, a good worker, somebody that's going to, do all the things you want to be as characteristics. And then you give them the skills that are specific to that job. And then a year and a half from now, when there's new skills, you can, re-educate them in a different area and always find a place to put that good, dependable worker to work, helping the company
Absolutely.
succeed.
So there are both state and federal incentives
Yeah.
for incumbent worker training, is what it's called,
Yeah.
that practically pays for that training. But it goes back to the fact that the human capital is so much more important in the new economy, so much so that communities are fighting over workers. They're trying to recruit them with bonuses and bounties.
Yes.
There are so many communities out there There are launching programs to recruit population and recruit workers. Everything from, if you move here, we'll give you basically a $2,000 signing bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you come buy a home in our community, we'll pay the closing costs. It's a really interesting way. In the past, old school economic development, we incentivized business locating in a community. We gave businesses incentives. Now we're looking at giving everybody from remote workers to, transplants incentives to come move here, because we
Yeah.
recognize that's the human capital that will be important for the
Yeah.
future.
So, and as we start to wrap up, I do want to touch on the impact of some of the immigration policies of the last couple of years, and
Yes.
the deportation of immigrants, as well as the quota limits for who can be immigrated in. And that, I would think, is having a real impact in the unskilled labor market of the service industry, but also in some cases the higher skill, because we would bring, which
Yes.
might be because within your chart that you're showing here again, the Asian part of the population was stunning how much it participated, and as a percentage of their population. And I wonder if that's because we for so many years have imported specific tech skills from from
Absolutely.
Asia, different Asian countries. And those, there, I know there was a big fight within the tech industry when some of those quotas got put in place because it was
Yes,
impacting their business. So what do you
that's
have to
right.
say about that topic?
That's absolutely, you're spot on, Karen. I showed this labor force participation chart again because it breaks down into racial groups. And it shows where Hispanic and Latino labor force participation rate is much higher than the general population, as well as the Asian participation rate. Um, so as our general workforce participation rate slows down and as our population slows down, we really need to look at reforming our immigration policies for creating more legal pathways to immigrate into this country. The American dream was built on economic opportunity. I'm a daughter of immigrants. My family came here with next to no money, but social mobility is the cornerstone of what makes America great. And as immigrants come here, the research has shown that very quickly the next generation or even the children of migrants quickly gain education, participate in the workforce, are thriving members of society. So our biases need to really take back seat to the reality of what our economy needs. And that's more workers and that's more productivity. Um, and you're correct, when you talk about immigration, uh, we really do need to look at easing some of the restrictions on those high skilled immigrant that could bring a lot of skill sets with them. And tech companies already realize that. They use visas to bring STEM related knowledge workers here to America. And that's because, once again, our educational system, I'm not going to knock, I have the absolute admiration for teachers and educators. They have a tough job because they're everything from uh, substitute parents to social workers to educators. They have a really tough job.
And they're
But
underpaid.
yes, and they're underpaid. But what's happening is that the system is not providing enough support, and we're not
Right.
producing enough STEM knowledge workers, people that have STEM knowledge, and that's science, technology, engineering, and math. and other countries are zooming past us in those areas.
Yeah.
So I go back to the issue of, yes, the President Biden's initiative to invest $100 billion in education is great, but are we throwing money at an outdated system?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do we really need to come together on both sides of the aisle, across all socioeconomic and racial barriers, to talk about what's best for this country? How do we move this country forward? How do we reinvent some of these systems that were meant for a different industrial economy to now the fourth industrial revolution, and what's needed for the next workforce and the future of our country?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. So I think that that's a great place to wrap up our conversation. Is there anything that you would like to add that you were like, oh, wait, I meant to say this too?
I think we've covered it, Karen. I want to
Yeah.
thank you for inviting me on your show. As always, just fascinating and interesting conversations. There's so many facets to this, and hopefully we'll cover that in some future podcast.
Yes. And so thank you again. So Christine Wong Rambo, president and founder of Upsize Marketing Strategies. Go to her website, UPSIZEMS. So upsizems.com to get more information. And if you're a community listening, if you're a community college listening, or a political leader listening, I think you need to give Christine a call and figure out what you can do within your own community to be able to get on the track for this fourth industrial revolution. And for the entrepreneurs and investors that are listening, consider what we have talked about in this when it comes to attracting the right type of worker. Please go listen to some of my podcasts about corporate culture and those kinds of environments for creating an environment that accomplishes your goal and is attractive to work in and be there, and you get loyalty from your workers. But also, consider what you do. We didn't really talk about it, but it came out during the pandemic. And I just saw something now when they're talking about, the pain of up going to $15 an hour. The average CEO makes 1,000 times more than what their entry level worker works and what they make. That's just wrong. Okay. So, that's a big part of it. And we've seen it too, what's been happening with boards and some of the things that the boards are stepping in and the stockholders are stepping in and trying to make the companies be more conscious capitalist organizations that care about their people and care about the impact on the community and the environment. And it's, if you as a CEO of a company aren't aware of this and planning for the future of how you're going to keep, retain, and attract and train qualified workers, then you're on a course to not be here 5 to 10 years from now. And that's to also to those investors that are investing in those companies. So I wanted to encourage you to reflect on what we have talked about today, assess your business strategy and plan going forward, and incorporate this information, because I did another economic talk a few weeks back, and he talked about all of the trends of what you can see as the um, baby boomers go through and the impact that it has on all the other different aspects of our economy. And so that, ties together on all of that. And please, as always, like the show, share it, tell people about it, help us promote this idea of compassionate capitalism. And please visit KarenRands.co and, check out what we do on the blog pages, all the different podcasts. And you can sign up for our Compassionate Capitalist coffee breaks, as there are 2-minute videos for entrepreneurs to and investors to understand how to create wealth through entrepreneurism, successful entrepreneurism. So again, thank you again, Christine. It was really
Karen.
delightful talking with you, getting to know you, and looking forward to, maybe we'll get out there and shake up some economic communities and get some economic stimulus going by firing up their brains on new ways to approach some of these problems. So with that, onwards and upwards, everybody.